What's the hottest 16-bit video game system with true arcade games? Altered Beast. Genesis from Sega Genesis.
Dave Whitney wanted the real arcade games at home. Mike Rogers wanted them too. But he got a Genesis system by Sega.
This is what it was like in the tail end of the 80s. Sega was rolling out their Sega Genesis console, and it really displayed a huge leap in graphic and sound quality from the NES games that everyone was used to. In order to really push their new game system, Sega played on its biggest strength, arcade games.
Dave, we got your golden axe!
Before the Dreamcast became legendary and the Saturn became an import gamer's dream machine, Sega was a truly popular and powerful arcade game developer. Arcade game hardware was much more powerful than the home consoles back then, so when Sega said they could bring you arcade quality games to your home, everyone listened and everyone was extremely excited. Did they deliver? Heck yeah, they did. The title they really pushed with their new system was Altered Beast. The game was only a year or so old when the Sega Genesis was released, so it was still a game that was fresh in everyone's minds. But before we look at that, let's go back a little farther to the original arcade game's first debut.
Rise from your grave.
This is the directive given to you by Zeus. You take the role of a Roman centurion that has been brought back to life in order to rescue Athena from the demon god Neph. During your journey, you'll come across wave after wave of zombies, skeletons, demons, insects, and all sorts of creatures that want to kill you. Luckily, you do have a way to power yourself up. Occasionally there will be two-headed wolves that run across the screen. The brown wolves indicate that a white wolf is about to appear. Killing the white wolf will reveal a spirit ball that will increase your attack power and range. The first two spirit balls will increase your muscle mass, while the third one will transform you into a were animal, depending on the stage that you're currently playing.
Welcome to your doom.
At the end of each stage, you'll have to fight Neph. He takes on a different form each encounter, so while the fights aren't complicated by today's standards, they do require different tactics, and most of his forms look pretty mean. Once you defeat Neph, he'll take all of your spirit balls away and attempt to escape. Your character will jump into the portal Neph went through, which will lead you to the next stage. That's pretty much how the entire game goes right there. You just rinse and repeat until you finished all 5 stages. The game was meant to be a quarter muncher, so many arcades at the time had the difficulty ramped up. The game doesn't really start to become difficult until the 4th stage, and then the 5th stage can be a nightmare if it's not memorized. Speaking of the stages, the 5 stages cross 5 unique terrains. Depending on which manual you're looking at, the stages can have different names, but they're all pretty similar. You start out in the graveyard, then move on to the underworld, then the Cavern of Souls, then Neph's Palace, and finally you reach City of Dis, or City of the Dead. As mentioned earlier, each of these stages has its own were transformation and boss. In addition to the first stage's werewolf, you can turn into a were-dragon, a were-bear, a were-tiger, and eventually a golden werewolf, which is exactly the same as the regular werewolf, except you're gold. I remember playing this game at an arcade as a kid and always being excited when it was finally my turn. When the game was new, there was always a line to wait in to play. The last time I remember playing the arcade version in the arcade and not on an emulator, I was playing with my younger brother and we made it to the 4th stage. My dad was giving us quarters because we kept having to continue. Eventually he said we had to go, so when we stepped away, there were several people behind already waiting to pick up and play from where we left off. Even though there are only 5 stages, I don't recall seeing much beyond the 2nd or 3rd stage very often. Just a few days ago, I got this in the mail. It's a 1988 Sega System 16 motherboard with Altered Beast. It even came with the original wiring harness and manual. I had to get an adapter to convert the System 16 pin out to JAMMA, but it works great.
Power up.
Altered Beast was a popular arcade game, which is why Sega chose it for their pack-in with the Sega Genesis. There are, however, many other ports of Altered Beast for many other computers and game consoles. I believe the most significant of those belong to the Sega Master System, the Sega Genesis, and the PC Engine. This is the Sega Master System version of Altered Beast, which was released before the Sega Genesis in the US. I used to borrow this game all the time from a friend, and I really played this game a lot. I did eventually get my own copy for my birthday, but I don't recall the exact year. I'm guessing it was in November of 1989, since I did get a Sega Genesis for Christmas in 1989. While the game looks and plays very poorly when compared to the original and other ports, it plays pretty well for what the system is capable of. The controls are more responsive than what you'd think just from watching the game in action, but this is due to the low amount of frames for your character's animation. This version does differ from the original in that there are only 4 stages instead of 5. The cavern stage, stage 3, in the original is gone. You are also only required to pick up 2 spirit orbs in order to transform into your were form instead of 3 spirit orbs. Surprisingly, the game actually says power up when you grab the first orb. Another difference is the scale of a lot of the enemies. A few are the correct scale, but most of them are a lot smaller than the originals. This is especially noticeable with the brown and white wolves and then the enemies that are in the final stage. Looking back at this, I can understand why I enjoyed this when there really wasn't another option for me to play this game at home. It's ugly, but playable. Altered Beast is a game that sold the Sega Genesis when it was first released. This was the pack-in game for the first truly 16-bit game console we got to experience on this side of the ocean, and it really blew everyone away with the better graphics, colors, and sounds than Nintendo's only console at the time, the NES. This is an excellent port of the original, but it isn't completely accurate. Some of the negative differences are missing frames of animation, the music resetting after a voice is played, power up, and stages 4 and 5 having their difficulties toned down quite a bit. With both versions set to hard mode, here's the beginning of stage 4 of the arcade version. And here's the beginning of stage 4 on the Genesis. Notice that the enemies take far fewer hits in the Genesis version. They're the same strength as the enemies on the first stage. Some aspects where the Genesis version is better includes parallax scrolling, power up, a secret menu where you can set which beast you want to play as in each stage, and the Were Dragon's lightning kick sound. I was hoping to find a video from Christmas of 1989 to pull a clip from for this, but I can't seem to find the tape right now. But I have a video somewhere of a friend and I playing 2 players with the second player using a Sega Master System controller. It really sucked because every time he kicked, it would kick and pause the game, and he couldn't jump, but we played it several times like that anyway. The third stage was kind of tricky since there are mandatory jumps, but once we were both werebear form, he was able to use the pause kick button to do the jumping attack, and we were set. As kids, my brother and I used to wrestle and horse around, and we'd say power up like we're about to open a can. My dad still makes power up jokes to this day. It's kind of funny since he really doesn't know where it's from, just that it was from some video game we used to play. I was going to go into a bit more depth with the PC Engine version of the game, but after spending some time with it, it's really not worth mentioning. It's a decent port, but has some control and difficulty level issues. Having to press up or holding up to jump is really annoying, and it's very easy to get stuck in a position where you get hit once and constantly bounce around until you die because there are so many enemies and you have such a short recovery period. It was released on both the HuCard and CD formats, with the HuCard version supporting 2 players and the CD version dropping the 2-player option and picking up a few of the arcade voices and sound effects. One interesting thing about this game, though, is the CD version has a story option where you can, from what I can tell, watch a storyboard about the events leading up to the game. The CD version will also only work correctly with System Card 1.0 and will kind of lock up when you transform into an animal. I do think it's the second best port of the original that I've played, however. So anyway, that's my perspective of Altered Beast. Thanks for watching, and please feel free to leave comments and subscribe.